It's Divas That Care Radio. Stories, strategies, and ideas to inspire positive change. Welcome to Divas That Care, a network of women committed to making our world a better place for everyone. This is a global movement for women, by women, engaged in a collaborative effort to create a better world for future generations. To find out more about the movement, visit divasthatcare.com after the show. Right now, though, stay tuned for another jolt of inspiration.
Namaste and welcome to the Divas That Care Network. I'm your host, Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground podcast. This is your first time tuning in. Our network is going into its 15th year and is listened to in over 30 countries. I'd like to personally thank you for giving me the gift of your time. As always, it is my honor to hold space with you. And today we have a super special treat, a friend of mine and a visionary in many different capacities. Mr. Charles Gording is here to discuss overall his artistic bent as the Chief Visionary Officer of DigiTrax AI. And more importantly, for our purposes today, we're going to be talking about the amazing artwork that he creates, which you can see displayed behind him, and just kind of go through his creative process and how he brings his vision to life each and every day. So, Charles, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about kind of how you get into we can talk about the mindset of it, absolutely, but how it is that you start your creative process and kind of bringing that idea of getting the inspiration, like having the hit or whatever, whether you see it in your mind's eye, how does it come through for you? And then what are the steps that you kind of take to implement it into what I see behind you now?
Oh, I mean, into its final form, that's a long process, but right. I approach it kind of as a lifestyle. So I'm not necessarily trying to get into the creative zone. I'm receptive to all creative ideas, right?
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of years trying to hone that ability. The best way to kind of describe it is like being an antenna, right, to the universe. And because you don't know where ideas are coming from. And you're definitely not going to catch them if you're not open and receptive to them. So always be collecting ideas in notebooks or in whatever form they come to you in, like little pieces. Allowing ideas to come to fruition, on their own, and then always understanding that you are kind of a vessel for that idea. There's like a great story of like a Michael Jackson not going to sleep and working on an idea, and because he was scared that the universe would give it to Prince if he wasn't there to like receive it, right? Which
That's
is
amazing. That is, but I mean, like I don't think the universe works quite that way, but so I don't actually know.
Yeah, if you look at like all great artists, they've always had the approach of being simply a vessel. I mean, and those are where the best ideas come through. Some ideas take a long time to form, and then there's that process of experimentation and iteration, and I kind of describe it as like water going down a hill, right? Like you don't know which direction it's going to take; it may splinter. A lot of times, good ideas, like you measure a good idea by if it leads to more good ideas, right? Good ideas will branch off and lead to more good ideas.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that like all of a sudden you could be suffocated with a lot of mediocre good ideas. So then there's that next process of like taking 100 ideas and refining them into, the 10 best ones, or, to finally get to one idea.
Right.
So depending on the project and what the aim is, it demands a different approach. A lot of times there's like that brain, like if I'm doing something on a canvas and there's no rules per se, like I have to kind of implement the rules of like what I'm trying to achieve. And even then I'm not sure where it's going to go. But if it's like a design problem, like I always say that like design is about solving problems, right? And art is about creating problems. So it's like a very, contrasting.
They go hand in hand, though.
Approach, but they go hand in hand.
Right.
So to kind of run ideas through both of those filters, to try to come up with something new, right? Combining stuff, but like always just be collecting, right? Always be collecting and open to new ideas. being able to borrow from something, right, and put it to something else, right? So you're filling up a ton of glasses at once. It's a lot easier when your domain of kind of expertise is very limited, right? But if you have so for me, it's like, oh, I'll have a music idea here, or a business idea here, or a drawing, painting idea here, or I want to just, build something with matchsticks over here, or like something with cardboard over here. You can kind of get lost in that play.
Right.
But then it all comes down to like, okay, what's the aim of this project? And then can you design whatever you're doing to fit that aim? But it really just comes from an overall mindset of being open, receptive, egoless. Like that's a huge part. One of the things that I try to strive for in the early stages of conceiving an idea or bringing a product to life is that like knowing that I can't make a mistake in the first part of the process, right? Like the best projects are where I'll get 80% of the way to a final, product, but in like 20% of the time. And then 80% of my time is spent on that last 20%, which honestly, nobody even really notices except for me and
except
like
for
other artists and stuff like that. However, like those are the best ideas that they kind of like make themselves.
Yeah, through the refinement process.
Yeah, or like it's very clear that like, oh my God, I'm just a conduit for this idea to come through me, right? And I think that I understood that from a very young age. Like I was raised on like jazz music, right? So like and like improvisation, stuff like that. So my dad would always, point to somebody on stage and be like, see him with his eyes closed, making weird, movements like he's in the zone. And like that's where your ideas come to life. You don't know what you're doing when you're in the zone. Right? Because you can't kind of be, Well,
you're purely in, in contact with that. I call it like the higher version of you, or like you are like, I talked to, I don't know if you know Sandy Roth. I think you do. But she and I had a whole conversation about the same thing in yoga. And we actually talked about jazz music on that episode as well. And just talked about the fact that like, those musicians, there's an element of your expertise as a practitioner, whether it's in design, whether it's, with a paintbrush, whether it's vocally, whatever it is. As for us, she's a yoga instructor as well. We practice yoga for however many years, and then we don't necessarily practice our sequences for class because you have one student come in, they can't, that their body's not going to be comfortable in a certain thing, and your entire class plan goes out the window. So she and I joked about how like there is nothing but improvisation kind of at life. And so the ability to be in that receptive, the thing about the receptive state though, and I love your antenna thing, but as we are all our vessels, I also think that we are all filters, right? So there's that perspective or that idea that no human perspective is the same because everyone is viewing the world around them through their own unique filter based on their experiences, how they were raised, the nature and nurture, all of that. And then as you become this receptive vessel, and I'm going to throw back to what you said about Michael Jackson and Prince, like their filters, if they had the same idea, that idea would not come out in the same way. No matter what, even if it was the exact same song lyrics, if it was the exact same melody, it would be completely different. So while, yes, we are all vessels, I also think that we are all individual filters, and that in some divinely orchestrated way, which I would never pretend to comprehend, either our higher self or whatever it is that you believe in that is bigger and greater than us kind of feeds us those things because we may be in our own special snowflake way the best vessel to bring that into reality as the greater expanse of consciousness wants it to be in reality. If that, I may have just gotten a little too out of left field, but you know what I mean when I say that.
The competitive nature of being an artist comes in because like I want to paint something better than you, or I want to make something better than you look. So I mean, like there's a lot of like technique and skill that comes into play as when you receive an idea. And the ability to receive the idea, in different forms is definitely a skill. But going back to what you said on the jazz stuff, as somebody who has worked in AI, specifically creative AI, since its inception, a jazz band improvising on stage is kind of looked at as the pinnacle of human creativity and something that an AI will never be able to replicate. And that's a really cool thing, because when you have like four musicians on stage playing in unison, improvising together, it's not just that they're reading each other's body language, right? Like there's a human element to that.
Yeah.
That we don't think AI will ever kind of comprehend. And even creative AI, what's cool about it is that it definitely breaks down the creative process, right, into these kind of stages where you can kind of see where the human element, will still exist and always exist. AI will never be able to replicate or do certain things. And then where AI is like really good at stuff. And I think that's where things are going in the near future, which is a really cool kind of moment in human history, where we're able to, we're really good at asking questions and AI is really good at answering questions, if that makes sense.
Right.
And we saw with chess, the best chess teams are now what are like centaurs, right? Where it's like human and AI working together.
Okay.
Right? So a great lens to look at AI technologies is like electricity.
Okay.
Like it's kind of in everything now. Like, can you imagine a world without electricity? Right? It's kind of fundamentally changes everything. So at the dawn of electricity, right? Like factories didn't know what to do. Some factories took 20, 30 years putting electricity into the process. Right. It's a lot quicker time frame nowadays in terms of integrating, new techs into process. But that's what we're on the dawn of right now, is trying to figure out, okay, yeah, you could type in a prompt and have an image for anything, or do deep fakes and stuff like that. But AI is really going to fundamentally transform everything from the ground up. We're starting to see some of that changes now. So I'm definitely not one of those artists that's anti-AI or anything like that. I don't think artists really have a good technical grasp as to what it can do and how it can transform things.
Right.
And that again goes back into the creative process of being open-minded, right? If we look at these things as tools, an artist, your process adapts to what tools you have available and what you can do. And if you approach something with a bias, instead of just I love just getting in and experimenting and seeing where these things can break, or how I can reapproach things, right? I could do a drawing now knowing that I'm going to be able to animate that drawing and bring it to life in 3D space, right? It's not just something static on a page. So I think we're at a really cool time in human history where we have this kind of convergence of a lot of cool tech. And I think in the next 10 years, it's really going to be eye-opening in terms of what spatial computing can do. Right now, I'm talking into a phone, I'm looking into a computer screen, right? It's very screen-based.
Yeah.
But as the computing platforms become spatial, everything becomes a potential screen or surface. With AI, information begins to overlay everything. It's not imagine doing yoga, but having, AR or spatial holographic tutorials, or, stuff around you, or a really cool kind of brave new world where if you have the proper approach to creativity and innovation and experimentation, who knows what will emerge.
Right. Right. And that can be, a double-edged sword, because, there are people who think very positively and constructively, and there are people who think a little bit more selfishly and destructively. And so we hope that the power that these tools have are harnessed for the highest and best good and highest and best use as they develop.
Won't be.
I know.
They won't be. No, it'll be.
Don't put that out into the universe, right? I'm gonna focus on the positive because I have to, for my mental well-being.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the part of people like me, of artists to experiment and then bring it to market in a way that shows people what these different things, these different tools and experiences can be.
Yeah, the positive implications.
Because it is magic. Some of this stuff is magic.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. It's a really cool time to be creating. Like I majored in hip hop and built a studio in my dorm room and was rapping and producing, and I did that all with pirated software from like Napster. And like I kind of came of age in that, like, at a beautiful time when it was like you had access to like every single tool. So it was like learning how to drive, but being given a Ferrari because you have all of those tools now, and they were so easy. So I'm definitely grateful for, coming of age right at the dawn of like the internet. Like I can still remember life before the internet.
Right.
And then I was blessed to start my first business like during the MySpace era.
Okay.
Like I started one of the first daily fantasy sports platforms, like before fantasy sports was even known as a thing. So like 2009.
Yeah.
And then I was in that, in the tech space for the rise of social media.
Yeah.
And I hate social media, and it's become like a necessary evil.
Very evil. I was about to say the exact same thing. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
And, I watched an entire generation of kids trade power for influence, not understanding the difference between the two. And I just never been about that. But I've seen and I regret that, to be honest with you. Like I probably should have put more, like I put a lot of effort into MySpace, and then when that went the way of the dinosaurs, it was like, why would I do that again for a different app, for that app to disappear? I hated the concept of like following people and stuff. And then I saw how fake it was behind the scenes, working with influencers, and I've always been turned off from that.
Yeah, it's very disillusioning, the reality of the facade, because it's an entire way of, it's honestly like a way of living that is just creating falsities.
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross. And like I try to keep my daughters off of it. Yeah, a lot of people are ignorant about how it kind of works too. Like behind the scenes, Right. So like just knowing how these platforms are built, and like the methods of, like I was never hooked. They never got me with with the unconscious hooks, right?
Right.
Like I was never trained behaviorally to like respond to notifications, and like I have a hard time responding to text. So my hope is that, in bringing all that up, is that like we do have a generation of kids who see it for what it is and kind of can recognize, hey, it's not about likes or follows or whatever, but really like, let's explore this domain, right? And pioneer new things. New types of apps, new types of experiences. Let's think outside the box. Even if that means taking a risk, and doing something, that is controversial or that hasn't been done before. Something like that.
Well, there's an element to it too of trying to kind of like play the algorithms against themselves, and like cultivating content that you do want to see, which has a double-edged sword of also limiting the problem with all of the platforms and all of the social and the internet kind of in general is that you can really, and people do, move themselves into a vacuum of their own choosing.
Yeah. I mean, we saw this with like Amazon book sales before. Right? It was like, what books, and that was like 2008. Right. Like we knew it was going to happen with social media. We knew like none of this stuff happened by accident. No. Like all of the problems that have emanated from social media.
No, it's by design. I mean, all of this, I mean, that's a whole can of worm topic that I'm sure we could dive into.
No, but those are the types of themes though that I try to play with in
your art.
Right? So like as an artist, right? Can you look at that from a meta, not the company meta, but from a third or fourth degree, right? And then try to create work that makes people think or confronts them with that reality.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the best art is stuff that like makes you feel something.
Yeah.
Like I love when people hate my stuff. Right? I almost like that just as much, if not more, as somebody who likes it. Right. What I hate is like apathy or indifference.
Right.
And I think like, that's where the artist goes to die.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
Is. But like that like that mean in the middle is where everybody in your life will tell you to go. Right. So it's like, oh, dude, you can't make a painting or an artwork of that. You know, it needs to be toned down or something. It's like everybody tries to push you into that middle.
Into a box.
Yeah. Which is like, no, that's not where real art exists.
Right. No, of course not. And it's also a matter of when you're talking about, and one of the things that I love about your artwork is it's very provocative. It's very, very provocative in a very powerful way, because it's not really in a box. And, you know, art is so subjective. And to that end, it's like when we're looking, like, I'm just going to take the ones that I can see behind you. There's so much emotion in your artwork. And I think that...
Well, let's add a link so that people can actually see some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Of course, we will. So, it's, in my mind, it's like when you talk about apathy and you talk about the ability to create emotion, music, because I know you have a base in hip hop as well, but music is a very evocative and powerful way to create emotion. Visually, statically, I think it is so much more challenging. And so when you can do that in an image, prior to the ability now that we're seeing to animate that image, et cetera, but when you can create tears, let's say, for example, in a person based on a static image, to me, that exemplifies like the peak of artistic, I don't even know what the word is, but just the pinnacle, because you are creating an emotion from a one screen, one image, and you've created it, you've put it together, and it's purely visual in theory, right? I know art is expanding much beyond that, but I'm talking, let's just for a moment hone in on the painting aspect of it. And it's so powerful to be able to create emotion in another human being. And it's almost like an alignment, potentially not of where you were going, because that's the other kind of flip side to the beauty of it, is that, what your intent for that image and what it can evoke in someone else can be two entirely different reasons, maybe one emotion, but two different reasons. And to me, that's very similar to jazz, to four people on a stage, right?
Yeah, how it's interpreted is out of my hands.
Right.
And there's two parts to the emotion that you bring into it. It's like, one, can I channel that emotion into something concrete, like a visual metaphor or something like that? And then, like, can the person, the viewer or participant, can they glean that emotion or a similar intensity of emotion from the piece back?
Right.
Now, that's a process that kills a lot of artists, to be honest with you.
How so?
It's like, and I say this to my daughters, bringing them up, it's like, if they're upset, draw me a picture of somebody crying. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody wants to listen to a song. And this is the problem with like AI in music as well, right? Like, nobody wants to listen to a song about love if you've never had your heart broken.
That's fair. Yeah.
I mean, if you've written a love song, but you've never had your heart broken, I really am not going to put too much into that love song.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
So yeah, you kind of have a double-edged sword here. And like, my uncle is a poet, right? So he's dealing with words, right? And then his son died, and he had to write poetry about that experience. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't imagine a more difficult process. And I can't imagine a more difficult kind of situation as being somebody who's tasked with putting words to emotions and then being given those emotions to make sense of, right? So it's almost as if, like, the deeper you go into the box, like the darker
the hole.
you can lose
the hole.
yourself. Yeah,
Oh,
like, there are
absolutely.
stories about, like, Stanley Kubrick. When he died, he had been working on like a Holocaust movie for like 8 years, and his wife was like, he was miserable, right? Like, if you're going to go into a subject, right, and or if you're going to explore an emotion, you have to do it with a vulnerability, right, and an honesty that
you have to let your boundaries
sometimes
down.
makes real life harder.
Yeah. Well, and that's like a different, so that, we're on the one hand, we're talking about creating from nothing, right? Or from divine inspiration, right?
Mhm.
Creating from your own mind's eye or whatever, however you interpret it. When you're talking about that kind of a creation where you are becoming the thing that you are trying to create, whether it's a documentary, whether it, you know what I mean, but whatever it is, if it's an occurrence that you are trying to bring a perspective to illuminate a certain viewpoint on, however you want to frame it, it's like I would say it. I don't know much about it, but I will make it akin to like method acting, where you become the very
Oh, yeah.
thing that you're trying to display.
Oh,
And
yeah,
if
very
you
much.
choose something like the Holocaust, that is going to be, I mean, arguably one of the most atrocious things that has ever occurred in human history that we're aware of, that we have documented. And so to deep dive down that rabbit hole is, I mean, I would never want to drop my boundaries around something like that to allow it in to feel that horror, to then reflect it back in through my filter, through my perspective, through my lens
Mhm.
of the lens of my vessel, if you will,
Mhm.
because I just would want to, that I'm sure he was miserable.
And the process that you just described for the last 15, 20 seconds would make for a great painting, to be honest with you. Of
Yeah, I
somebody
mean,
somebody trying to undergo that process.
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe you commission a down boundary canvas, right? You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like
yes.
and that's what it's all about. But like, and so our conversation now has created this idea in your mind, right? And it flew through my mind when you were talking about AI, which I will be very candid with you, scares me on a visceral level, the implications of it. Um, Again, things that have the most power for good also have the most power for harm. I believe that duality very, very truly. But I was thinking, all right, awesome. Like if I was teaching a yoga class and I could have an AI of me as the muscular system breaking down whatever muscles in real time on a holographic image next to me, showing my students what I want them to do and why, so that I can, explain it, that would be amazing. There's an implication that I never thought of that I would love. And what if I was the first yoga instructor to do something like that, right? Like, so just in us having this conversation back and forth, here are two ideas that have come to us from the other's perspective, the other's, iteration, if you will. And I think that that's part of what the creative process is all about. And it's why mutual back and forth between people, just like the jazz element of it, creates beyond the AI and beyond, let's say, my stream of consciousness and my connection with my divine to your connection with your divine, then creates this entirely other. And
Yes.
you
Yeah.
do need that human element and to bounce ideas off each other, because we don't live in a
That's the
vacuum.
centaur right there, where it's AI and human working in unison, doing what each thing does the best. And that's a really cool, empowering process when you get it right.
Yeah.
Like as an artist, a lot of jazz musicians that worked with music AI, they have said, I would have gotten to that idea eventually, but this saved me, 2, 3 days
Yeah.
of work to get there. And I found that same thing with AI, where it's like, it's never really blown me away with anything that is created, because I know I would have gotten to that point eventually. I could just get there a lot quicker now,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like a superpower with being able to sketch ideas or visualize things or mix and match things or apply styles uh, but you need to have that kind of play mindset, right, at the beginning,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that's a really cool mindset to have. But then you need to have the technical expertise and the experience with how to transform that mold of clay that you've been playing with into its final form. And there are a
Right.
lot of steps and phases along that way, which take continual, learning and, input from others, wisdom from others. Mentors will tell you how to finalize stuff or what to look for, or, just processes that come with having done that so many times.
Right.
Like how to prune things. Like a lot of times in the beginning, like you hear the term kill your babies, right? Like I have this great idea, but it's not working in this context. You got to kill it, right? Like how to prune things
Love that, but
the
yeah,
thing is,
yeah.
the best artists will take that, it's over here. It doesn't mean it's dead, right? And then like 3 years may go by, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I have an idea, and now all of a sudden that puzzle piece fits with that perfectly, and it never would have happened if it wasn't discarded from the previous project, right? And you see that happen all the time and if you look at people who have ever made something great, they've always said the same thing, right? It's the culmination of a bunch of different great things that came together, right? And a lot of those great things started off as very simple ideas that gain in complexity. Like complex things are just a lot of simple things put together.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a skill with being able to kind of discern, okay, what are the foundational building blocks, right? And that's also as an artist where it's like you'll never run out of good ideas. That's another thing. Right. Is like when you're open to the source, right? When you're open to the universe, when you're open to nature, right? Like always being in awe of nature, because nature's the most incredible.
Amazing.
But like I don't understand people who are fascinated with aliens. I'm like, just go outside and look at a tree.
I know.
Right? Like it's amazing. Nature is amazing. I try to teach my kids that, like always being in awe of just what awesomeness we live in and around. Yeah. And when you connect with that energy, right, you understand very quickly you're never going to run out of ideas.
Right.
Right. Like it's an infinite loop, make a great idea, execute on it, and then kind of let it go. And in the beginning, that was hard for me to do as a perfectionist because something could always be better. Something can always be better. I can work on something forever if you give me forever.
Well, that's kind of, I think, leading me to my next question for you is, the inspiration, right? How it filters through, how you begin to make it, your own, in quotes, for those people that are not watching. And then, the process of execution, the process of refinement, like the devil's in the details a little bit there, right? Because people can't, you can micro until you drive yourself nuts. So what is your, let's take a moment. How do you process, how do you fine tune from the inspiration, from the idea, like where do you start? And then where do you stop? How do you start and how do you stop in the physical?
Starting with usually, like I said, it'll be a lot of different things coming together, right? And then it depends on what I'm working with, right?
Right.
The process of stopping.
Yeah, let's talk about that. How do you stop?
That's tough.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough. I usually look for, honestly, like a sign from the universe that says like it's time to stop.
Right.
To be honest with you. You get a feeling when something is done.
Yeah.
Like in music, it's a little easier. Like when you hear a final mix, like you get a certain feeling when it's done, or like when you've hit it, and it's like, and then you chase that feeling for every single thing that you do. Yeah. It's easier when it's a design project or something like that, because design, again, is around a certain problem. If I want to communicate a certain idea, I know that idea, can be communicated. The hardest place to stop is on a canvas where it's just me.
Right. And that's
it's kind of like, I will tell you that nothing that I've done on a canvas is done. Yeah. I need to take photos of it to make prints because I have a show, and that's why it's done.
Right.
Like honestly, it's an answer like that where I'm gonna mess something up more if I start doing it, continuing it. Or if somebody looks at something, like you'll look at something and be like, yo, that's awesome, can I put it on my wall? And I'll be like, that's halfway there.
Yeah.
And then I start to think, well, what is that person? That person's seeing it.
Right.
Right. And then it really comes down to, okay, are you just trying to be a perfectionist on every detail? Or is this piece communicating whatever message, emotion, is it doing so effectively at this point in its creation? Right. And then you can let it go. The other part is like market pressure. So it's like, hey, this needs to sell, or something like that. Like those are other artificial constraints, like time.
Well, and I know, and that's no fun. That takes the life out of the. I know it's reality. It's reality.
I'm not going to be able to give you a very solid, awesome answer on how the process stops. Right. Usually, what I try to do is like, okay, I'll create 100 ideas for something. I'll combine the best 10 into one. And I've done all of that other work that most people would quote unquote throw away, or what a waste, right? But like all of those pieces are kind of ruminating still, right?
Yeah.
So like one piece will usually lead to 2 or 3 more pieces.
Right.
Like I'll start something and have an idea while I'm doing that, and then start the next one. And the problem with that is then you have like 8 things that are going at once.
Right.
Yeah, that's why like, the best artists that are doing this at the peak, or like just creating at the peak, they have like a big warehouse.
Yeah.
Where it's like all of those ideas are out in the open, and you can move effortlessly from one to another. So like anywhere that river's flowing, right?
Yeah, that's where you go.
It's like, oh, I have a music idea. Let me jump into the studio and do that. Oh, idea for this over here. Yeah, and then you try to just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Right. And then from experience, knowing what's going to work, what's not going to work, how to package an idea to sell it. If it's in like a business context, or you don't know what the hell you're doing, and you try to put all of those pieces into your head and do activities like lucid dreaming, or some of those other kind
meditation.
Of esoteric things where like there's different modes of thought. The best way of thinking that a metaphor is like a pinball machine. So like if you're actively thinking, that pinball goes in and that pinball is bouncing around tons of different things, right?
Right.
If you're actively thinking. In diffuse thinking, right, which is the other daydreaming, right, would be an example of that. There are a lot less obstacles. So when that ball goes around and the pin is bouncing around, there are a lot less things for it to hit.
Right.
And that's where all of a sudden ideas can make sense. That's where I'll jump out of bed, or like, be like, oh my God, I call it getting hit with the hammer of God. It really is. Like when all of a sudden an idea clicks, like all of a sudden something clicks.
Yeah.
It's like an all mind consume. It's a very special feeling.
Yeah.
These are the things though that take me out of the world. Like if I have an idea like that, I'm in the studio for hours and I'm in my own world.
Right.
And that's where girlfriends will be angry at me or frustrated, or like my kids are like dad, and I'm just like in a different.
You're in the zone. That's the zone. Like that's and I think it is synonymous with creation, right? You cannot, or if you do create outside of that place, I don't know if it's going to be as pure. And I use the word pure loosely there, but I think you know what I mean when I say that.
I think here's the difference between being an amateur and a professional. Right there is like, if you're like, it was a great quote that it was like, like professionals don't need inspiration. Right. Like I have a process. I could sit down with a piece of paper any day of the week, do something creative. Like I know the process. I don't need inspiration. Right. But when you get hit with inspiration and you have the kind of tools necessary to bring that to life very fast, like that's when something special happens. Right. So it's a lot of like you're not going to be good at an instrument if you're not practicing that instrument, and the same goes for anything, skill based. So
no, 100%. And I think that there's, again, there's that intuitive sense. And I think that like the one thing that I took from, when you were talking about stopping is it sounds to me like it's a little bit full circle, and that the kind of hammer of God that strikes at the beginning to give you the inspiration, it's just as intuitive for you to find the ending. Otherwise, someone's finding it for you because they're saying, hey, I want to put that on my wall.
Yeah, it's usually someone finding it for you, because I try to not stop. Right. Like you're thinking of it as like, okay, when are you done with the piece? It's like, no, I'm never done with any of the piece. I'm always just working on stuff. And like when the piece is finished, it's finished. And I'm on to the next one. There's never not going to be a next one. Right. If I'm never not working on a picture, I'm in a grave.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's just the way, like my fingers literally are indented because I just hold a pen in my hand. So at like the end of the day, I'm never doing an artwork, like art for anybody else other than myself. Right. Like I'm drawing to stay alive. Yeah. Because if I'm not drawing, then I'm just going to go insane. Right. And a lot of stuff is.
Oh, that's a lot of artists. I mean, listen, so going back to the whole Kubrick thing, like when you are in my mind, a true creative. Let's not even just pigeonhole it into artist, but when you are a true creative mind and you have that capacity, I'm going to throw it to a root metaphor as well, because you brought up a tree, and I kept thinking, like, we talk about, we always think about the tree from the top down, right? Because that's the part that we see, but the roots are where it's all coming from. So if you flip that upside down and you think about the fact that all of this inspiration, all of this process, right? Like the inspiration's coming from the soil up through the root system. That root system is our human filter. It's our design. It's our perspective. It's all of those things. And then what we create, in essence, the process is the trunk, and then what we create is the tree in a very basic.
And if you're next to another tree and your roots are connected, and then you have the fungi that connects all of the roots into like its own nervous network. That's why being around other creative people, right, and stuff like that. And then also understanding too, like that you are just a vessel. Like at the end of the day, we are all the same stuff, right? And always keeping that in mind too.
Yeah.
Like we're not. So that's why the best art will resonate with a lot of people.
Yes.
Either positively or negatively. Right.
Yeah.
But the worst thing you can do is just make boring stuff that doesn't hit somebody. And that's always like, my mom is a great litmus test, because if she likes something that I do, I knew I made it too mellow. Right. It's like I need my mom to hate everything that I do. It's like the ultimate act of defiance. But it's just,
and the irony is, I know you get at least part of your artistic bent from your mom. So, there's
absolutely.
Like, so
but when it comes to like content and messaging and stuff like that, she's always like, well, why can't you just do the flower? Why does the flower have to be growing out of a skull, in an eye socket? Well, it's like,
right.
It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor. But it's provocative, right? Like it's your mom. You two have very different markets, very, very different. We're going to bring the professional back into it, very different target markets. But it's your artwork, essentially, any kind of artwork, any kind of medium. It's a piece of the person. It's a piece of you. That was the whole point of having this conversation with you, is bringing, like, you are creating from the roots, the source, whatever you want to call it. Your creation is from your vessel. It is a piece of you. It is a piece of you that you have created that was not in existence prior to your existence.
Yes, and that's a lifestyle. That is absolute. And if anybody wants to learn that process, and the absolute best resource that I've come across for learning that is Rick Rubin's book, The Act of Creation.
Thank you. I will.
And then this little plug right there. But Rick Rubin is the guy who started Def Jam. He's one of the most famous producers ever. He's the guy with the big, huge beard. If I had an idol or somebody that I looked up to, it would be him. He kind of distilled a lot of what I've said into very simple, short, easy to read chapters, right, in a book called The Act of Creation. And it's about, and he's been around the greatest artists of the last few decades. And he's kind of just distilled those lessons down into very easy to read kind of stuff. And I've definitely relayed a lot of the stuff that's come from that book. It's a lot of stuff that I knew is, like any artist can tell you that, what he's saying is very similar. But if anybody wants to learn more about my approach and other people's approach, that's definitely the best resource.
All right. Good. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And so to that end, I think one of my next questions for you is, when you're talking about the art of creation, one of my goals in yoga as an instructor, even with this podcast, is to inspire other people to create and to inspire people to follow their own guidance. I have I'm not going to go down that, but I have a personal reason why I try to develop my communication with my intuition as my compass at life, and to not have to necessarily rely on an outside influence other than, the daily grind or whatever it is that you need to do to survive. But other than that, I try to take my next steps in my everyday from a place of my own intuition, so that I have no one to blame but myself if things don't go according to divine plan. So do you have a process for yourself to, and it sounds like you don't have a lot of creative blockage, which is awesome. But do you have any, and I'm not going to call it spiritual, but do you have any tangible, just like the book that you mentioned, tangible things, which is what I try to leave people with, tangible things that people can do. For me, I usually go with meditation to connect to that intuition within you. But what is your process for connecting into that space of receptivity? Or do you find that you live in it, which can be overwhelming, I would imagine?
Yeah, it's overwhelming as a single parent trying to manage that state of being with everyday interruption.
Right.
That is the daily struggle of mine, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because like it could take 2-3 hours to get into a creative zone.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, like you're interrupted. And it's like that start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. That it's not conducive to any type of creative thinking. That's when I start to go insane.
Yeah.
For me, it's just a lot of alone time thinking, to be honest with you. I mean, I could sit there and stare at a wall for 3 hours, but like my mind is moving 1,000 miles an hour as I formulate pieces and try to put things together. I've tried to go back and study through time what people did to tap into that zone, right? You have like Edison sleeping on his couch, like in his lab, like with a ball where he can kind of catch himself, like in a lucid dreaming state. Meditation is a great one. Sometimes just doing like rough sketching, like something like that, like to get into the zone, or like reading. It's like something though where you're not, where you can allow your mind to drift, put it that way. That's where like having my phone anywhere near me, game over. Anywhere like where you're going to be interrupted, or you allow yourself to be interrupted, like that flow state is going to stop.
It's gone.
What I measure everything in my life through is like flow and friction. I found this to be very simple. Like this thing in my life is going to bring me flow, or it's going to bring me friction. The more things I can do in my life to allow flow energy, right? It's like the better, right? Relationships, I always put relationships through that kind of lens. Like, is this person bringing, I don't want to say positivity, but like, is this person bringing something forward moving, positive energy, where it's not like a black hole vampire energy where, you know, we're talking about people and drama and stuff that like I just don't want to deal with, right? And like I just consider all of that just like clutter and friction, and starts to feel like sandpaper, to be honest with you, like going through that grind. And I'm extreme in that. So like if I just sit on hold for an hour with something in the morning, like I know I'm screwed for like 3 hours. Like that will have just driven me so insane where I need to, and then I start to isolate, right? So like I don't know, I still haven't perfected this process yet, right? Like I'm still dealing with that, but that's an everyday struggle. And I try to just maximize, big blockages of time. Right.
Time
so
blocking
like
is huge.
maybe I don't, I could do something in 2 hours, but like it's really going to be good if I have 6 hours to do it. Right. Because then I'll have time to like kind of get into it, and I'll be able to work with the pieces without that like little timer in the back of my head saying like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. Like I work best. I always say like no clocks, no calendars. Like if you could put me in a situation where I don't know what time of day it is and I don't know what day it is, you're going to be getting great art. And like, I'm going to be the happiest I am. And, like that's the essence of me. And that took many years of the people around me learning, right? Where they're not like, where's Charles? Like, you're being a bad friend. It's like, no, dude, that's just me, and I'm working, and I'm not being a hermit. Like come into the studio. Like, I love that. Let me play music for you. Let me show you artwork. I'm used to people coming here. Like, I'll go out to a bar and just sit there and I'm like, I'm miserable right now. Because I don't have that kind of energy or flow. And like sharing stuff too and getting feedback from people. That's a big part of the process. Like I love sharing stuff that's in process. And getting feedback from people, and whether or not I let that influence the final piece. That's thing. Like I'll respect other people's stuff. I'll also know why they're saying certain things, and I'll be like, yes, I wanted that to get under your skin. but the flow friction metaphor, and there's a bunch of them, right? I don't think it's unique to me, trying to, it's not an accident that most great artists get money and the first thing they do is build themselves like a warehouse and disappear into it. Like I think that's every artist's dream, which is like, I mean, literally every great artist has done that to some capacity where it's like, I got paid, now leave me alone, right? And I'm in my big open space to now work.
I'm in a bubble.
Unfettered by,
the outside world.
Yeah, or the demands of just an everyday job, or the demands of like, so being a single parent has made that tough. I hope that I'm showing my kids all of this on an everyday basis so that they can be incredible artists, and they're kind of shaping up to be these like great little creative vessels. And they can kind of internalize a lot of these lessons that I've learned the hard way over decades, very early on. When you look at like great artists, like Picasso, his dad was an art teacher. So like I have that in the back of my head, like, if I feel like if I can instill a lot of this stuff into them, early on, it'll benefit, like they can be, or 10 times, 100 times the artist that I am. And then, staying focused on the overall kind of vision, which is like, you're not attached to one piece, just make as many as you can, right? Like always keep moving and always keep creating. And there's something like, I can never imagine not living a creative life. I just can't imagine that.
Well, you'd probably be miserable, to be honest.
Well, the creativity would come out in different ways. I mean, I feel like it's an energy that is very anti-fragile. That's another book. Like if anybody wants, it's not necessarily a creative book, but like understanding anti-fragility in a creative sense, you kind of have an appreciation for randomness or entropy, and it being able to make certain things stronger, and then kind of going with the flow. And I by no means have the answers to a lot of these questions, and I'm still learning.
That's the whole point, right? I don't think we're supposed to have the answers. If we had the answers, life would be pretty boring, or everyone would just be perfectly successful, and then that would still lead to boring and mundane and the same. And so
and at least that's another
meant to have the
like
answers.
how do you gauge success as an artist?
Happiness.
Like a lot of people will gauge success as exactly, are you living a creative life and are you able to produce things daily on a basis? Other people, especially like in the social media world, will be like, it's how it's received.
But that's not
and
true
it's like,
art.
That's not
it.
It's not, it shouldn't be the driving force
No.
behind what you do and the value that you attach to stuff. Like, I don't care. I really don't care how many likes or how viral something gets. Like when I'm done with it, I'm done with it. How you receive it is like, that's the job of other people around artists to promote, right? Like my job is to produce work, right? To promote it and, like present it to the world. That's something that's getting used to. I'm doing more shows and stuff like that.
Yes. That's the necessary evil of the business aspect of the creative space.
It feels very weird. I'll be honest with you. I've never been, even like with music back in the day, like promoting music. There's so much mediocrity out there that like, hey, listen to my music and look at my art and give me a follow. It's like, nah, man. Like, just saying that feels weird, but that's my own internal kind of bias. I like to stay focused really on the producing and just making the dopest stuff possible. Like that, like my company slogan is like, make dope. I don't want to swear, stuff.
Stuff.
But like that's the slogan. It doesn't matter what domain that's in. Right? It could be in fashion, it could be in art, it could be in music, it could, be in tech, anything. And it has that, just that intangible dope quality.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, that's like the manifestation of the zone, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's the tangible, like it's then driving it all home, wrapping it up in a nice, pretty bow. Thank you for doing that, whether advertently or inadvertently. But it's just that is the idea behind the creative process, is bringing the zone into reality. And like you can see it, and I've always used the sports metaphor a lot as well, with jazz, with sports, like top athletes, you see it very easy in that visual. But when you're talking about art specifically, or you're talking about it's like your uncle, when you're talking about like he had to complete that project, and I'm sure that was very, very, I'm sure he went through a process not dissimilar to yours, as he was the ending, the wrapping up of that, the selection process. That's the painstaking, to me, I feel like the culmination is one of the hardest things that you can do, that you can feel complete in as an artist, is the feeling of completion. Because like you said, it doesn't stop. You're always going to be creating, and you're always going to be manifesting that zone into something that is actually separate and outside of you, which I think is the distinction between something like the written word, something like painting, versus something like a top athlete versus a jazz musician. They are in the zone, and you can see it, and in the room with them, you witness it, you bear witness to it. Something like this is very different. You are exemplifying the zone in something outside of yourself. You are in the zone when you create it, and then you've created something that is a physical representation, a manifestation of the zone in reality, that someone can then take and hang up on their wall. And to me, that is effing beautiful.
Yeah,
that is very special.
I agree with you. That's why I think I've been drawn to drawing more so than any other thing, because it's kind of like, yo, you give me a stick and like dirt, and I'm gonna draw something dope. Like it's like very primal.
Yeah,
It's
literally.
like one human versus another human. We both have a stick. I bet you I'm gonna do something a lot more creative. And to me, that's always been like, okay, it starts with that, and then from there you can manifest these things into final form, whether it's a painting or a song, or it could be like with movement, like with yoga routines and stuff like that. There's an entire world that's invisible to us. I think that's the biggest thing, is that like
Absolutely.
being humble and open to a world of energy that we barely comprehend. And at the end of the day, we are just animals, right? And like we're all from the same tree, and we're from the same universe, and part of the same fabric of energy. And the more you can be humble and in that space, the more open and receptive you are to the ideas that pass through that. And the best artists will have the strongest antennas in being able to make sense of that energy and manifest things that resonate with other people and outside audiences. And as stuff goes to market, it gets transformed in different ways or whatever, but like that's not up to me. And there's stuff that's out of my hand, and the only thing that I can really control is the root of that process, right? Which is actually, can you bring into form these different ideas. And the process is different for everybody. If somebody doesn't know where to start, I would recommend like I run into this with like clients a lot too, when they want to build like a new brand or a new logo, right? So like very narrow scope, right? But like I don't draw or whatever. And I'm like, yo, can you sketch 100 different types of your logo? Well, I've never drawn anything ever. I'm like, I don't care. Just force yourself to do 100 little things.
Yeah.
And like I guarantee you, by the end of it, you know exactly what you want to see. Like there was no playbook for me to do any of this stuff. I majored in hip hop.
Right.
Like I literally says hip hop culture on my degree. And the thing about hip hop was it's an art form that started from nothing.
Yeah. It was
like the essence of hip hop is transforming nothing into something, right? We have no art classes. We have no schools. We're going to steal cans of paint and we're going to draw on subway cars that go through the city so that people could see our artwork. We can't make music, so we're going to take a record and we're going to cut it into break beats, right? And we're going to create beats off of sample records, right? I don't have a microphone. I'm just going to start rapping with somebody on the corner.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have a dance floor or a dance studio. I'm going to take a cardboard box and I'm going to start breakdancing on the corner. Like hip hop is literally the essence. And this comes from like the experience of American slavery and that, you know, a lot of the creative resistance, right? Like the seeds of creative resistance that were formed there. It's like so like in studying hip hop, you really have an appreciation for there is no right or wrong way to do this. And a lot of times it's going to come from doing something differently. Right? Like I'm going to take this turntable and I'm going to use it differently than to just play a record. And all of a sudden, something new is born, right? So having, taking some of the lessons from that, which was you don't need anything to start, right? Just take the same stuff and make it something different.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is teach yourself. So like me coming of age in the internet, it was like Web 1.0, and I don't think kids will appreciate this kind of stuff anymore. Where it was like MIT open courseware. It was like I could go to graduate school at MIT, or I could just download every course for free online and do it myself. I did that for 3 years.
Yeah,
I took every course at MIT, like aerospace courses. I didn't like write the papers, but I did all the stuff on the syllabus.
Yeah,
and I was like the knowledge for Web 1.0, like the knowledge explosion that was available was insane. And next thing you know, you kind of like Facebook and these other platforms popped up and they kind of created like these walled gardens that people, like kids nowadays see the internet through those lenses or whatever.
Right.
And it's not like, hey, this was like all of the world's knowledge for you to learn whatever you want. And I think that's what you need to have, that spirit of kind of exploration.
Yes.
And it's a little harder nowadays because you got to fight through, like you said, you got to fight through your own filter bubble first.
Right.
You got to fight through your own algorithms. And it makes it a lot easier when you understand how these platforms work, right? From a technical standpoint, like why your algorithm is working the way it is, or, how to game it and stuff. And then trying to escape that so that you can kind of be kind of like set free in the library of knowledge. Right?
Yeah.
Like the internet's crazy and people don't really get that anymore. And what's worse now is that like AI is now learned on that and now just spitting you back like little pieces. So I do think I had like a very unique upbringing in terms of when I came to learn everything that we've talked about in the context of like the internet and new emerging technologies.
Right.
And, it's really up to this next generation to figure out. It's funny. It's like, I look at all this stuff and I'm like, I want to create dope artwork, right? And it's like the next generation needs to look at all of this stuff and be like, okay, we need to actually save the planet with this stuff.
Right.
So I look at AI through the lens of like, oh, AI is making my pictures move, but it's like, we need AI to kind of like solve, climate change
problems.
Extinction. That's happening a lot faster than expected. Right. So you kind of have to balance the big picture and the small picture. Balance the creative exploration state with okay, I'm done exploring and experimenting. Now I need to kind of bring these ideas into final form. Right. There's the self-editing process that usually hinders people from doing that right off the bat. So if you approach things from the standpoint of like, okay, I can't make a mistake, like that gives a tremendous amount of like whenever I get a new notebook, right? Like I'll write on the first page is the hardest, and then I turn it, and then now I'm off, right? Because like everybody gets stuck on that first page or like that self-editing. If you realize that the first draft that you make of anything is going to suck, then you make the first draft no matter what. Yeah. I don't have any great answers on how to finish stuff yet. I don't know if I ever will.
That's okay. Listen, again, it's not about the finishing. It's about the process, right? It's about the process.
Which probably means that nobody has a great answer to that because I have not found one yet. And I've been actively looking for that because I am a student of the creative process.
Yeah.
But other than like you just kind of know, like your intuition.
It's intuitive. It's intuitive, and that's
your intuition is a muscle. Like people don't understand that either. Like if you're not listening to your intuition ever, or you question it, it becomes a lot harder to work. But like the more you exercise your intuition, it is absolutely a muscle in all areas of your life. And then being able to kind of like catch your own biases and thinking and analyze yourself honestly and openly, understanding that you're not the emotion or whatever, but the essence behind it. So that kind of borrows from a lot of different.
Well, that's a bit like, I mean, that comes down to self-awareness. Like all of the muscle of the intuition, the entire thought process behind, stopping, right? And the entire process behind knowing, like the intuition, that sense of knowing throughout the creative process, knowing when the next step in the process is ready to begin. And I think that's part of the answer to the ending, is not necessarily the ending, but the new beginning, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like that next step, whether it's another painting or another idea that sprung from that idea, that now you're off to that. Maybe there is no true ending. Maybe it's all a new beginning.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the culmination of it.
Yeah. And if anybody's listening to this and they're like stuck in that spot, just starting stuff, this is where like the experience comes in. Like you start enough projects, you can then step back and be like, okay, now I need to start finishing these. This is what happens when I start 10 projects at once.
Yeah.
Like, and those are all just like kind of small creative problems. But like, if you're approaching everything from being open and receptive and understanding that you're an antenna and a conduit through which ideas flow, you may be technically better at bringing those ideas to life, but it starts with that oneness.
Well, not better than, just I believe it was meant for you. Like whatever idea Michael had wasn't meant for Prince. It was meant for Michael. If you're asking me about my belief system, I believe that. And the same for you, right? Like there are going to be visions in your mind's eye that are going to come to you that would not come for your mom, right? Like, like there's just that is, and I believe that is our own, again, like unique. We're all individual. We're all one, but we're all a little bit different. And so bringing whatever your difference is into tangible reality. And if everyone does that in their own way, whatever medium and whatever it is, hopefully only uplifts, as long as, again, you're using it for the right, for the right and the good, right?
Yeah. I think there's a tremendous amount of empathy and that comes along with that, right?
And again, the self-awareness.
Yeah, and a tremendous amount of like respect for others and whatnot, regardless of what like the actual work is. Right. But yeah, it's a grueling process that I wish schools kind of spent more time cultivating.
That's another can of worms conversation about but yes, and I think that one of the banes of my existence was standardized testing. I'm not a good test taker. I could write a paper any day, all day long, but I cannot. It's not, multiple choice is not my friend. And so I think that, like avoiding that rabbit hole at all costs, other than to say that I think a lot of the school systems have gone in that direction and away from the creative mind. And I think that is potentially by design. And I don't want to get into my thoughts on that, because
it's like
again,
the STEM versus STEAM argument, where like, should art be added to that? So we'll see.
Yeah. Only time will tell, but hopefully the parents and hopefully families will instill all of that creativity, all of that channeling of the goodness of the zone, of the higher connection, if and when schools don't or choose not to, because hopefully you spend more time with your kids than they are at school over the long haul anyway.
Hopefully.
But I just want to thank you so much for all of this insight. You and I both. And I want for all of our listeners to be able to find you and connect with you. And so would you like to drop some locations for where they can best reach out to you, find your artwork, find some of your music, and potentially hit you up for commissions?
Yeah. At The Human Animal on Instagram is probably the one that I promote the most. But any on any of the social stuff at The Human Animal, and then Dangerous, DANGERO.US. But you can find that link on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way for everyone to hit me up.
Perfect. Charles, thank you so much for sharing this.
For having me on.
And it has been my ultimate pleasure, and always deep diving in this kind of thing. You could go on forever, but we will craft our own ending as a new beginning. Awesome. And I am just going to say to you and to everyone who's listening how much I appreciate each and every one of you for sharing your space with me, and ask that you please feel free to share the same with your loved ones. For more goodness, follow me on all the socials at Above the Ground Podcast, and visit my website, airsaboveyoga.com. As always, don't forget to check out my other episodes and my amazing sisters at divasthatcare.com. You can find us on Spotify, Odyssey, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you might feel guided. Again, my name is Gia-Raquel Rose, owner of Airs Above Yoga, and you are listening to Above the Ground Podcast, where every day is a good one.
Thanks for listening. This show was brought to you by Divas That Care. Connect with us on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on divasthatcare.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss a thing.